Hello everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to present my learning on a subject I am passionate about. Single subject integration in the service of a varied, connected, transdisciplinary education for students in a PYP setting. Here is a bit about my background. My name is Zach Smith. I was in the International Baccalaureate program in a high school near Denver, Colorado. After graduating in 1998, I attended an alternative liberal arts college in Olympia, Washington, emphasizing transdisciplinary education. I became a preschool teacher in Shanghai at the Shanghai Community International School a few years later. I moved to the KAUST School in 2014, where I began to teach in a PYP program, which is where I am now. I have spent much of my life learning and teaching in transdisciplinary institutions, which has brought me to today, thinking about how to implement single subject integration with you all. Here's a little roadmap of what we will be discussing today. I would like to start with why we should strive for integration between the different disciplines in our schools. It's always nice to start with an explanation of why, right? After that critical piece, we will look at what single subject integration is and maybe what it isn't. Then we will get to another essential part, how. How can we, as single subject teachers, make connections between what is happening in our disciplines and the rest of the learning going on in our schools? In addition to my ideas on this subject, I'm also enlisting the help of some very qualified teachers, Kristen Anson and Andy Vasily, from whom you will hear in video form throughout the presentation. Are you ready? Here we go! I'll use several analogies to illustrate my ideas in this presentation. I hope they will all make sense in time. The first analogy has to do with this presentation's Lego theme. My son is 11 years old and loves to build Lego kits. Here he is with his latest build. It took him quite a bit of time to finish because it is minutely detailed. We have jobs when we build together. I find the pieces needed and he puts them together. Finding the pieces is pretty tedious, but it keeps him engaged and gives me time to think. Just recently, as I was searching for a particularly hard-to-find doodad, I was struck by the complexity of the model we were building. All these little pieces stuck together, making something very intricate and magical. It reminded me of creating curricula and holistic learning experiences for children. That's why I chose Legos to decorate these slides. We single subject teachers are specialized parts, but we're just as important as any other. The question is, how do we all fit together? And why is that important? We teach disciplines that can be very disconnected from one another, and it takes a lot of effort to connect ourselves to all the other learning going on. Why should we do it at all? I would love to claim that I wasn't just trawling the internet for quotes when I found this perfect one, but actually I was. However, I love the book Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, and it just so happens that he uttered this quote that brings about another great analogy in this presentation: conflating bridges with education. What does it mean to you? Let's use the quote to play the "what do you think and what makes you say that" game. Do you ever play that with your students? It's an excellent way to encourage them to take a position and provide evidence to support it. Let's try it on you now. I'll give you a bit of time to think about it. Bridge building. It's a noble pursuit, making connections between seemingly disparate locations. It's vital in education when learning can easily fall into silos and become isolated. Learning a lot in many different areas and connecting those pieces is a sign of intelligence, which is what we are striving for. The intelligence I'm speaking of now is not innate. It's the product of a well-rounded education. Intelligence does not exist in isolation, as concept-based education leader Lynn Erickson might tell you. Oh, look, there's a relevant quote. We can't disregard context when trying to mold intelligent students. We also can't ignore the connections between the disciplines we teach. In our schools, students must develop knowledge and skills which may be discipline-based. However, they also need to build conceptual understanding and lifelong learning dispositions, which often overlap between subjects. Traditional views of transdisciplinary education involve single subjects adding value to the classroom learning by supporting topical learning. An authentic integration goes deeper, bridging the gap between seemingly disparate disciplines and making the connections explicit for students. Along the way, we must also develop essential dispositions such as open-mindedness, curiosity, metacognition, truth-seeking, strategy, and skepticism, which combine with knowledge, skills, and understanding to create students' intellectual character. As modern-day educators, our charge is developing intellectual character, an idea expounded by Ron Ritchhart. Opportunities to foster these dispositions abound in the single subjects, and we should take advantage of these opportunities whenever possible, which is another reason why single subject integration is so pivotal. To wrap up the explanation of why single subject integration is so important, let's hear from our first outside consultant, Kristen Anson. Kristen is a very experienced PYP art teacher who has taught in many schools worldwide. We will be hearing from her a few times during this presentation, including right now.
It's hard to wrap your head around why this kind of conceptual understandings and teaching in a transdisciplinary way, why it's important and why it's necessary. But then when you look at the underpinnings of it, when you look at what's the purpose, right? What are we really trying to do as single subject teachers? Is shading a sphere the purpose of what I'm doing with these kids? Is this what they're going to take with them into adulthood? And of course, the answer is no. I don't really care whether you can shade a sphere or blend colors or things. Yeah, it's important to study things related to your discipline, but I want them, it's those 21st century skills, right? It's, can they communicate? Can they be creative? And can they realize that single subjects don't occur in a vacuum, and school doesn't occur in a vacuum as well.
Hopefully we have successfully elucidated why single subject integration is essential. Let's move on to authentic single subject integration in an inquiry-based educational setting. You may have heard about the difference between teaching topics and teaching concepts before. Now, let's go deeper into that distinction. If we are to go to the trouble of integrating our disciplines, we must first ensure it's a genuine fit. How do we know the pieces fit genuinely? As teachers, we must ask ourselves, are the concepts we are planning to teach timeless, universal, and authentic? Do they remain constant and relevant across ages, places, and disciplines? What is authentic single subject integration? Let's read an entry from Kristen's blog and ask ourselves, does making a papier-mâché goose teach students about the concept of migration? Have a read. Let's first focus on what not to do. I found this school website while researching this presentation. This, in my opinion, is the wrong way to go about integrating. Want to integrate into a unit on history? Make cave paintings, starry nights, and Mondrians. There is a connection, to be sure, but it's basic and superficial. Where is the student's choice in all this? Where is the authentic learning in copying someone else's work? How else can authentic conceptual learning be achieved in single subjects? Let's do better. To use a contemporary example, let's talk about climate change. Climate change is an essential topic for students to learn about. However, climate change does not necessarily offer authentic transdisciplinary learning opportunities. Of course, it has its place, but not in authentic single subject integration. If you're an art, music, drama, language, or physical education teacher, how could you deal with the topic of climate change in your discipline? Of course, in art class, we could use recycled materials to create sculptures, which would reinforce the importance of reusing materials to combat climate change. We could write a song about recycling in music class. We could learn all kinds of foreign vocabulary words surrounding the topic of climate change. In PE class, we could stress the importance of biking over driving cars to school. However, these examples would ignore conceptual understanding in our disciplines. They would represent unnatural links to the skills needed in our disciplines. The knowledge gained would be subservient to the classroom unit. It would not be an authentic single subject connection. Climate change, a crucial topic, would be an example of topical learning, which leads to superficial transdisciplinary relationships. Let's take out the topic of climate and focus on the concept of change. We can explore a broader range of issues that fit our disciplines more authentically while still learning about essentially the same thing. I recently attended a workshop given by Tanya Latanzio, and she had a similar idea. She called it making the shift. If change is what we have to work with, as single subject teachers, we suddenly have a host of options that can authentically fit into our curricula. Now, I ask you, how would you make the shift? How could you help students add to their understanding of change in your context? For another example, let's go back to Kristen's blog. Her art unit was a level 3 integration. We'll get into that more later, but it means that she was sharing the classroom's central idea: living things adapt to survive. The conceptual lenses were adaptation and creativity. I encourage you to read the post, but in a nutshell, the students were invited to make pinch pot animals in many different orientations: right side up, upside down, and sideways. Then, the students needed to make a story about their animals and why they had changed to their current form. In this example, the students learned pottery skills, how to make a pinch pot. They were also demonstrating a conceptual understanding of adaptation, and they made it authentic by creating their own stories that explain the reason for the adaptations. If you're worried about beginning integration, your move is to start small. We can move toward it bit by bit using common questions. Andy Vasily is a PE teacher, pedagogical coach, and educational philosopher who has worked in many international schools. He has a simple idea about what integration can be and how it can be achieved, which we will hear now.
How do we go about starting this? Like, what's a good realistic way for a school who hasn't been particularly collaborative to get started with this, on this journey?
Okay, so I think the best way, and this is what I've worked on with a number of schools around the world who have started this for the first time. So rather than jump into the deep end, just work on co-constructing one conceptual question that will be used in both spaces. There, boom, done. It's just so you're collaborating around one common question you're going to ask. So if it's PE in the classroom, or music in the classroom, or world language in the classroom, just get in the practice of collaborating around that common question that you're going to unpack in both spaces. Okay? So if it's that example of conflict resolution, why do conflicts occur when working in a group? The kids come to PE and there's a poster on the wall with that question. And the same question is up on the wall in the classroom. And the classroom teacher's unpacking it, and PE's unpacking it and saying, oh, what are you learning in the class about this? And the classroom teacher is, oh, what are you learning in PE about this? Or if they're doing group work in art, why do conflicts occur when artists work together? You know, sharing materials, sharing space, cleaning up. You know what I mean? So I think that is, and devote a whole year to it. You don't have to go deeper than that. Just the whole year is about co-constructing common questions. So the schools that I've done this with, it alleviates that pressure of having to do more. Just get your feet wet with collaborating around these co-constructed questions, and then come together and share what's happening, and then maybe springboard a new question to take it to a deeper level. And I think that's the best way to start.
In summing up this portion of the presentation, the what of single subject integration, I want to remind you that there are many ways to integrate, and we should always strive to make the ways we integrate timeless, universal, and authentic. Next, we'll talk more about how to make this happen. But to wrap up this section, let's bring it back to the personal. Think about a unit you have integrated before. Taking into account what we have learned so far, is there anything you would change about how you currently integrate? Or, if you have not yet begun to integrate, how might you begin? Now that we understand why single subject integration is essential and what it could look like, let's get into a discussion about how we can make it happen. Let's learn how to build those bridges we talked about before. We have just looked at how to connect learning via broad concepts. However, perhaps it is the case that the concepts just don't fit in our single subject units. No problem. As PYP teachers, we have many tools for building critical educational bridges. Pictured here are 9 possibilities. How do we, as single subject teachers, know how to connect with the classroom units authentically? We need to plan our units carefully, scrutinize the classroom units, and effectively collaborate with our colleagues. To achieve genuinely authentic transdisciplinary learning, we need to understand how our units fit together and be honest with ourselves as to what depth we can integrate. Here we see the levels of integration chart used in the Cow Schools Elementary School, which Andy Vasily developed. As you look at the chart, you will hear him explain its rationale.
And that's when I came up with the levels 1, 2, and 3. Which
we're gonna be using that in this presentation a lot. So tell us how you came up with that, and how it's evolved and what it is today.
Well, because I felt that there was a big gap missing in integration in the IB. So it was like, let's get really ultra precise. Is it really just 2 units a year? Or are we looking at creating a framework where we can think about to what depth we're integrating? So it's not just one-off integration or full integration. Why don't we create this framework where like level 3 integration would be in the single subject, you're using the same central idea as the classroom and some of the big concepts. A level 2 integration would be maybe in PE, I have my own central idea, and in the classroom, you have your own central idea, but where the roads meet is some related concepts, okay? And a level 1 integration would be you have your own central idea, I have my own. Most of the concepts are different, but we meet on an ATL or a learner profile. So some of the best integration can still be level 1. And a quick example I will give is a grade 3 unit in the classroom we did a few years ago on landforms. So a geography-based unit, landforms unit. And in PE, we were doing Adventure Challenge. So on first sight, it's like absolutely standalone. There's no way we can connect. But what the classroom teachers were focused on in grade 3 was group work. The kids were going to be working together the whole unit. Well, that's really teamwork. Now in Adventure Challenge, group work, teamwork is our focus. So we agreed, the classroom teachers in grade 3 and the PE teachers, well, conflict is going to arise when you're working in groups. So now let's unpack the question, why do conflicts occur when working in a group? So that's a level 1 question right there. And different central idea, concepts are all different, but that's where we're meeting on an ATL, conflict resolution, ATL basis, and then unpack what that looks like.
The levels of integration offer teachers a chance to collaborate across all of their units at some degree of depth. This may well spell the death of standalone units, but it doesn't demand it. Andy and I talked about this, and I want you to take a look. We're a bit passionate about this subject.
You find when you approach it in this way, level 3, level 2, level 1, there's less standalone. You still might have 1 or 2 standalone units, but there's more opportunities to connect because you've remained open to collaborating around what's best for the kids and their learning.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about standalone. I mean, I contend that this could possibly mean the end of standalone units, because there's always a level 1 you can come, or there usually is, I think, a level 1 that you can come up with. So you think there's still a place for standalone units in the single subjects?
No, I would like it. My blue skies is that you're always connecting at a level 1.
Yeah.
Right. But I've met up with so much resistance.
Yeah.
From classroom teachers and single subject teachers are saying it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I'm saying, make it friggin' work.
Yeah.
Look at the ATLs and what do you think your kids need to know? And we can make it work in the single subject, So it can seem completely polar opposites when it comes to the units, but the ATLs transcend the unit.
Oh, yeah.
They transcend the discipline.
It's life, right? Yeah, it should be approaches to life, really.
Yeah. So I still believe that regardless of what we present, there's still going to be teachers that will want to do standalone.
Yeah.
But let them do standalone. But for the teachers who are really open to continuing these discussions, sit together, look at the ATLs as a minimum entry point or a profile, and think about how you want to unpack that in a unit in a way that is done in both the single subject and the classroom.
So, how should we start on this process of collaborating to create meaningful connections between disciplines? First, we need to build relationships with our colleagues. Just as students need the right approaches to learning, teachers need suitable approaches to collaboration. Interactions are crucial to collaboration, which Kristen Anson will explain.
Like as a single subject teacher, how important it is to develop strong relationships within your teams, and really putting in that effort outside of planning meetings, making an effort to go to the staff room, even if you're feeling tired, making an effort to just have a quick chat in the hallway with people, because once you develop those trusting relationships, and if you have a healthy culture at your school, when you go into those meetings and someone tosses you an idea that may be more thematic, or for whatever reason, it may not kind of fit in with what you were thinking for a unit, you can feel confident and comfortable enough to kind of have an open and honest conversation with them. And also another thing I was thinking about as well is the ability to not fear making a mistake. To say we took a look at doing these year-long units with grade 3, and I couldn't really wrap my head around how it was going to work, to be honest. But I said, okay, let's give it a shot.
If we are to collaborate successfully, our planning should be clear and concise. A timeline is a great way to achieve this. The timeline has all the planner's information, but is more visually accessible. It shows clearly when all of the key concepts, related concepts, and approaches to learning will be rolled out. It also highlights the central idea, learner profile attributes, and conceptual lens. This planning tool helps teachers collaborate more effectively because it allows everyone to see the unit's features at a glance, which promotes connections. It can also be used during the unit to check progress, and at the end of the unit to reflect on the degree of success achieved in the integration. Since we now have more latitude in how we design our unit planners in the new PYP guidelines, I suggest using graphic organizers to organize and document integration ideas. I have placed a couple of examples here on this slide. The most important information to include is the integration point, the method we will use to connect the learning, the guiding questions we will share, the homeroom and specialist content that will be explored, and the method of documentation. Using shared digital documents that can be individually updated remotely is also a good idea. I have added a couple pictures here from one of my favorite education blogs, Making Good Humans by Taryn Bon Clegg. She has some fantastic ideas about planner documentation, and I highly recommend checking out her blog. Speaking of documentation, it's essential to make the connections between disciplines explicit for students. A book I would recommend on the subject is called Visible Learners, which was put out by Harvard's Project Zero. This can be done in several ways, but we will focus on one right now, the mind map. Mind maps are large, simple charts that track the learning in each discipline, framed by a simple essential question like, how do we express ourselves in ... The mind map could be divided into sections, and the different disciplines' teachers would add words or pictures to illustrate the learning in their area. The students would bring the document to each class and display it in the homeroom when not in use. Mind maps are just one of many ways to use documentation to spotlight and celebrate transdisciplinary learning. Collaborating on a unit requires careful planning, and it is also vital that everyone's time is valued. Single subject teachers often shy away from collaboration because they get pulled into time-wasting meetings. However, if the meetings are meticulously planned and everyone is informed of what is happening and when, magic can happen. Andy will give us a bit more insight on that now. Team leaders, take heed.
Tell us a little bit about how you actually do the planning. How is that? What's the best way to go about that? Is the specialist coming to meetings? How long? How many times? What happens before the unit, during the unit?
Okay. I think one of the things to honor teachers' time is to be very precise as a PYP coordinator, curriculum coordinator. The last thing a single subject teacher wants to do is to go sit in a grade level meeting and have to sit there for 40 minutes as other things are discussed that are irrelevant to them. So first of all, the importance of an agenda and knowing the purpose of why the single subject teacher is going there. So if it's brainstorming the integration, then that's put on the agenda. So if the meeting is from 3 to 4, and it's going to be nuts and bolts and math and literacy and all these other things that don't involve the single subject teacher, don't make the single subject teacher show up until 3:30 when on the agenda you're going to begin to start that conversation about what integration might look like in the next unit. So that's the first thing. And there are still lots of schools that make single subject teachers sit through meetings that they don't have to sit through. So if it's during the unit and you already know the focus of the collaboration, the integration, then maybe it's like, okay, you've unpacked the same question. Well, maybe from 3:45 to 4 o'clock, the single subject teacher is going to share their poster and what the students have unpacked in their discipline. And the classroom teachers will share theirs, then they'll make a decision around the next step. So I think the most important thing when it comes to planning is to have an agenda and to know the purpose of why the single subject teacher is going, and to be really stringent, like strict with time, so that their time is not wasted and classroom teachers' time is not wasted, and to block it into the meeting time.
To recap, here are a few guidelines for how to make single subject integration happen. The first step is to build those important relationships between teachers so that we can effectively share ideas. Next, we need to examine our unit and find an authentic connection point, which will also decide our integration level. In meetings and/or individually, we should plan the integration and document our plans. Then, the integrated units are carried out with students. Don't forget to document in the method of your choosing in order to make the connections explicit for students, which could lead to a celebration event of some sort. At the end of the integration, we need to reflect on what happened so we can make improvements in the future. And then we start fresh again with new units. Remember, if something did not go exactly as we planned at the outset, it's okay. Authentic integration is a process that we can continue to work on. I want to leave you with one final message from Kristen. This is about trying something new, something challenging, something beautiful. I hope that I have helped you understand why single subject integration is essential, what it can look like, and how it can be achieved. With Kristen's help, I would like to finish my pattern of wonky analogies. If single subject integration seems as daunting as a child crafting a 3-foot ceramic pangolin, I encourage you to go for it, because success awaits you and your students.
Okay, so to have that relationship of trust and integrity, not only with your team, but with your admin as well, that they trust you enough to let you fail. Just like you would trust the kids, right? So if a kid came to me, we're doing ceramics. This is a perfect example, one of my grade 4s. Miss Kristen, I want to make a pangolin out of ceramics. And I kind of went, oh my God. All right.
Horribly dry.
Okay, let's do it. Let me give you some of the skills that you need. Let me explain how all of this might work. Explain all the things that can go wrong with this, but I'm going to give it a go, give it a shot. And this kid, Astrid, has just came out with this 3-foot long, gorgeous pangolin. And she was willing to fail. She was willing to give it a try. And and she succeeded. And yeah, it was really, really cool.
Well, the point there is, even if she had failed, right, then none of that learning would have been lost, right? And she would have learned something else too, right? You know, like, so like, we're not gonna seriously damage the children if we, try something bold and we've never done before, and it doesn't quite work out as well as we wanted it to, So and then we did the learning ourselves, and we can adapt the next year, So that's Absolutely. 3 feet. We should all try to make 3-foot pangolins, right?
Thanks so much for your attention. Please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions or would like to collaborate on future projects. I want to learn more about this subject myself. I want to celebrate your successes. Thanks again.